Hey everybody, this video is meant to guide you in your own mallet practice. In addition to this, I recommend that you set up a mirror in front of you and place your video device next to it so that you may follow along and try to match up your technique to mine the best you can as we go through the video. Now before we get started, I'd like to make something a little more clear. You have to understand that you're all beginning. Learning how the weight is distributed in your hands and on the mallet are things you will only get used to with time spent holding mallets. So, to achieve the things we ask you to do, there will probably be tension in your hands and possibly arms. The purpose of practicing these things are not only to build skill sets and get used to having these things in your hands, but also to slowly learn where you can relieve tension in your hands and still properly perform a task such as block chords. Like I've mentioned before, block chords have a very similar stroke type to two mallets. Instead of a knocking motion, four mallets uses a karate chop motion. This motion is generated solely by the wrist. Although your arm may move or shake due to the karate chop motion, you want to avoid any motion in the elbow or any bounce from the arm while training this stroke. The goal of block chords is to strike the keyboard with all four mallets at once with one full sound, like so. Something that is common amongst beginners is the outer mallet droop. I think we've all seen that a little bit in rehearsal. The way we combat the droop is not by just holding the mallet harder, like so, a lot of tension there, but by finding a more stable angle of the outer mallet in your hand. This takes some experimentation. The way I think about it is I try to curl my pinky finger up as opposed to having it be more unfolded. Notice that I'm not squeezing harder. When I squeeze harder, I end up in the exact same place, but with more tension. So as you're chopping out on the floor, watching SpongeBob or whatever, this is something that you should be focusing on and experimenting with. This brings us to the topic of rotation. Like I mentioned in rehearsal, maximum rotation from the wrist is necessary to create a strong, consistent sound. And just like every other stroke we have, you want the rotation to be a quick snap down and back from the keyboard, like so. This strong rotation generated from the wrist can only be strong and consistent if there's a break or bend in the wrist. Without the break, it doesn't allow the mallet to have any time to wind up and gain momentum throughout the stroke. Notice the difference? You also start to play on top of the mallet, which has a completely different sound from the core of the mallet. So you always want to have that leverage. Something to keep in mind with four mallets is you want the mallet's motion to be reactionary to the rotation of the wrist. Think of your hand as a joint and your mallets as a limb. At no point would you be forcing the mallet through a strong grip into the keyboard, like so. I like to call that pointing and clicking. The mallet would gain momentum from being called into action by the hand, right? You want the mallet to be reactionary to the motion in your hand. My wrist is turning, and the mallet just so happens to be in my hand when I turn it. So, altogether, the karate chop, the fat part of the thumb and the middle finger meeting to hold the inner mallet, the position of the outer mallet, the break in the wrist, and the relaxed hand are all needed first before we express anything musical. No one wants to be held back musically because of our hands. The frustration over an inability to express yourself musically is what drives a lot of people away from performing. Lastly, I'd like to talk about permutations. Permutations are nothing different from outside-insides, or anything block chordy, right? You're just isolating each of these strokes and doing them one at a time. Now, this is probably the best exercise you can do to start getting used to permutations. Is very slowly, I'm talking like 60 beats per minute, going mallet by mallet in order. 4 on each. Then 3 on each. Two on each. One on each. And then slowly, the more comfortable you get with that motion, building up the tempo. You should never bump a tempo unless you feel completely comfortable playing it at the tempo you were just at. Speed is not the name of the game, right? We talked about how our brain has these neural pathways and that they solidify those pathways when you do a task, right? So when you do a task right and you do it slow, you're going to be building good muscle memory. Now, you can do that same exercise with literally any permutation, right? Let's say you wanted to switch it up and do 1, 3, 2, 4. You can do the same exercise. 1, 2,